Hello, everyone. This is Darcinovia here, back once again with another review. This is going to be my first review of Star Trek Voyager related fiction. Star Trek Voyager, as of this review, I have not finished the series. I'm on its fourth season. This novel in particular is written by one of the co-creators of Star Trek Voyager, and the placement of this novel in terms of where it would take place would be during the second season of the show. Now, before I get to the actual review itself, I'm just gonna make it known I'm not the biggest Voyager fan. I mean, I started almost a year ago. It's been a struggle to get through it. So, if you're wondering why it's been taking me this long to start reviewing anything related to Star Trek Voyager, that's the reason why. The show has started to grow on me, so yeah. So if I'm not as enthusiastic at this point on reviewing this novel compared to others, that's because Star Trek Voyager is not my favorite Star Trek show. Now, without further ado, I'm going to get started and just give you my thoughts on this particular book, and do I think it's worth checking out if you are a fan of this show. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. This novel was published early in Voyager's run. So, if there's anything that contradicts later sources, that's the reason why. And, well, I've been reading, I just been looking for multiple sources, so I cannot confirm this with 100% certainty that at one point this book was considered canon, even though that's a contradiction, considering, according to, Star Trek, the owners, the only thing that's officially canon in Star Trek is the live action TV shows, the movies, and that's it. Now, I don't know if that's how things work now, because we have Star Trek Lower Decks, which is likely canon, pretty much. So that's probably a little bit different. But one thing that has never changed is Star Trek books and comics have never been considered canon. And, well, this novel, I don't know if I can really buy it that it was at one point canon. So I'm just gonna say that I'm very, skeptical if it ever was. Though certain things that were alluded to in Voyager, is um, explained in this book, like Janeway's tennis, and how she has a hatred for it, and she at least she did as a child. The death of her father. So I do think maybe certain aspects of this book, were canon at one point, but then it was ignored by the curators. Now, if before I get to the in-depth portions of this review, unfortunately, if you are a fan of, later Voyager, it's honestly, it has some of the things that I don't like about Star Trek Voyager. I mean, I don't even remember the creatures' names that were the main enemy of the Voyager crew in the first two seasons, until season 3 is like, fuck off, we don't want to deal with you guys anymore. And I just consider them really the most forgettable and worst Star Trek species ever. So this book has two particular storylines. One that takes place during the present, with Captain Janeway and her crew trying to survive, and Janeway trying to save her crew. The present portion of this book takes place in the span of 9 hours, while the past portion takes place over the span of many years in Janeway's life. And we get glimpses of what her childhood was like, what what she was like before she went to the Starfleet Academy, what how her first assignment on a starship went, and her first command. Now, we don't actually get really too much into her first command. It's just, I mean, this is like a very short book, so there's a lot of stuff to cover. I mean, you probably would have to have a 500-page book to be able to cover this in depth. But yeah, now I'm going to give my thoughts in the spoiler section. So for those of you who don't want spoilers for this book, I suggest you turn away now. Now for the spoiler section. In all honesty, I actually thought the past portion of this book was a lot more interesting than the present. But the past, I'll just call them flashbacks, are connected to the present situation in this novel. And the reason I say this because when I watched Voyager for the first time, when I watched the first episode, Caretaker, I thought Janeway was an interesting character. Very little was known about her when we first are introduced to her. And, well, she wasn't your stereotypical female character that we've seen in Star Trek up until this point. I mean, we have our badass characters like Kira in Deep Space Nine, Jadzia, Dax, and a few other female characters in Deep Space Nine. Voyager introduced us to a female captain, and in all honesty, I was interested in learning more about this character, and I think the actress they chose for her fits the character well. Now, in this particular novel, it is interesting to read about, this tough as nails captain, what she was like prior to her becoming the captain of the Voyager, and it's very interesting. Her morals, everything that she believes, everything that she does, it's all shaped by her childhood. And I really wish what is written in this book was explored more in the show, because I actually think like half of this story in this particular book in particular just felt like a generic Star Trek Voyager episode. But the past portion of this book that explores her past, explores her triumphs, her failures, is definitely the highlight for me. And it was one of the reasons I picked up this book to begin with, because I may not be that interested in Voyager at the time I picked it up. The show is slowly growing on me, and even though this was published, before the Star Trek literary verse, the modern one, became what it was, I still think that this is a worthwhile read. And in my opinion, if you can find this book for cheap, I'd recommend it. I mean, you can get it on Kindle. You could get it at a used bookstore. You can get it on eBay. I mean, this book isn't that difficult to find. If you're a Voyager fan and you want some more, stories, with the Voyager crew, this is definitely a novel I would recommend reading. I know I didn't get too much into depth with this book. It's just, before I adapted the new format, I did not take as many notes as I could have. And not to mention, unlike Azadi, where I've read the book before and I listened to the story on Audible 2 times, I haven't done it for this one. So if this comes off short, that is why. And I'm going to get to my verdict of this book in the next section. My final thoughts of this book. First, I'll get to the pros. I think the author who wrote this book, since she is a co-creator of the series, did a great job writing the characters. All the characters in this novel, they feel like they're themselves. They feel like they're from the point they are in the show. It feels like I am watching an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Now, whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing is completely up to you. But I actually think, if you're trying to make this feel like a Star Trek novel. It is very important to nail down the characters' personalities, if the characters are acting like themselves, or does it are they acting like someone they're not. Luckily, with since this is one of the rare occasions we have people who actually worked on the shows writing this book, that's not an issue. Every character is in character, not one of them is out of character. And the star of this book, Janeway, it, it delivers on its promise of actually revealing parts of her past. Even though this book is a very short read, it could have done a lot more to dive into her past. But I think the little bits that we did get, I thought were satisfying, and made me appreciate the character of Janeway more. It actually makes me want to go back to watching Star Trek Voyager, despite this taking place in the second season of the show, which is my least favorite part of Voyager. I actually think this is a good read. Now, to get to the negatives, the negative part of this book is it takes place, in the span of 9 hours. The present portions feel like a stereotypical Star Trek Voyager episode. I actually think the author of this book could have been a bit more creative. I actually think the past portions the should have been the entire book, in my opinion. Then again I'm biased, but I just felt like the past portions of this book was so good that it made me dread reading the present portion, because the past was just so much better. Like, it dived deeper into Janeway's character. Even though I understand why the present parts are there, I feel like it could have been handled better. So, my overall thoughts of this book, I think it's a good, book if you're a fan of Star Trek Voyager and you're looking for, some Star Trek fiction to start with. I think this is a good standalone book. If you're looking to read some Star Trek, novels, and you don't want to dive into long series like the later iteration of the Star Trek literary verse. So yeah, I would check this out. I mean, you can find it on Kindle, you can find it on Amazon, you can find it on a used bookstore. Whatever you can get it for cheap, I'd recommend it. So yeah, it's Star Trek Voyager. Despite me not being the biggest Voyager fan, I relatively enjoyed it. Next time I do Star Trek fiction, I'm going to be, well, it's either going to be a Deep Space Nine book, or I'm going to be reviewing one of the best novels that were written by you know I'm not going to spoil it. You'll have to see. May we all live long and prosper, and see you guys next time with another video.